She sold her hair for a stranger's ring, not knowing he was a millionaire testing her kindness. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The subway station smelled of iron and wet concrete that night. The digital clock above the platform blinked 11:47 p.m., and most people had already gone home. Only a few stray figures waited for the last train, their faces half hidden behind scarves and exhaustion. At the very end of the platform sat a young woman, her back pressed against a cold marble pillar. Her name was Ella. Her hair, once so long it brushed against her waist, shimmered under the dim light like a copper river. But something strange happened that night. In her trembling hands she held a pair of silver scissors. A homeless woman with scissors in a subway station was not an unusual sight in the city. Yet what Ella was about to do would make even the most indifferent passerby stop and stare. Across from her, a man in a dark coat sat silently, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked ordinary, too ordinary. No one would have guessed that under the worn-out jacket the man was Christian Miller, one of the youngest millionaires in the country. But tonight, he was undercover. He wanted to test something he no longer believed in: human kindness. Earlier that evening, Christian had argued with his fiancée, a socialite obsessed with luxury and status. When she lost her engagement ring in a restaurant and accused a waitress of stealing it, Christian had watched silently, disgusted but curious. He wanted to see what truth would reveal itself when money disappeared from the equation. So he followed the incident all the way here to the station where the accused girl had run. Now, that same girl sat across from him, unaware of who he was. Her reflection flickered in the vending machine's glass as she whispered to herself, "They said I could get enough for it, maybe even buy it back." Christian frowned. Buy what back? Ella took a deep breath and gathered her hair into a thick bundle. Her eyes glistened, not with vanity but with quiet resolve. Then, with one sharp motion, the scissors closed. The sound, a crisp snip, echoed down the empty tunnel. Strands of copper fell to the floor like the final seconds of her pride. The man across the platform stood, startled. "Hey, what are you doing?" She looked up, startled too, but there was no shame in her face. "Buying something I lost," she said simply. Her voice was soft but carried through the station like a secret meant to be heard. "What could be worth that?" he asked. "A promise," she replied. Minutes later, the next train roared in, breaking the tension. Christian watched as Ella placed the hair inside a paper bag, handed it to a stranger waiting near the exit, and received an envelope in return. Then she turned and walked away, her head now bare beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. He followed her out of instinct. The rain had started again, and she stopped beneath a flickering street lamp, opening the envelope. Inside was a small velvet box. She smiled faintly through the tears and whispered, "It is yours again." Quote, he recognized the ring instantly. The same engagement ring his fiancée had accused her of stealing. For a long moment he stood frozen in the rain, his heart pounding in disbelief. Who sells their hair just to return a ring that never belonged to them? And why did it feel as if the woman he should have loved was standing right in front of him, barefoot, rain-soaked, and more honest than anyone he had ever known? That night, under the trembling streetlight, Christian realized one thing. He had gone undercover to test kindness. But kindness had just tested him first. The next morning, the city was still wet from the night's rain. Puddles glistened on the sidewalks like broken mirrors, reflecting pieces of a sky that refused to brighten. Ella sat on a bench near the edge of the park, clutching the same velvet box she had bought back with her hair. Her fingers were pale, her eyes swollen from sleeplessness. The wind tugged at the uneven strands that framed her face, the marks of her sacrifice still visible. She opened the box again, as if to confirm that it was real. The ring sparkled faintly in the weak daylight. A circle of gold and diamond meant for someone far above her world. She whispered to herself, "It was never mine, but somehow it feels like I had to protect it." Her stomach growled quietly. She had not eaten since yesterday. There was no money left, no job to return to, and her landlord had already thrown her things out the week before. The hair money, what little there was, had gone entirely to reclaiming the ring. A newspaper page blew across the bench. She caught it by instinct. On the front, in perfect glossy color, was a photograph of Christian Miller, and his glamorous fiancée smiling at a charity gala. The caption read, "Power Couple of the Year." For a moment, Ella could not breathe. The man from the station, the stranger who had watched her in silence, the one she had thought was lost like her, it was him, Christian Miller. She stared at the photo until the letters blurred. "So that is who you really are," she murmured. "And I am no one." Across town, in a glass tower that scraped the clouds, Christian sat at his desk, staring out the window. The city looked cleaner from this high up, as if poverty and pain could not climb past the 40th floor. Yet all he could see was the woman under the streetlight, her hair falling like flame, her hands trembling as she held a ring that was never hers. He had tried to test kindness. Instead, he had found guilt. "Sir, the board meeting starts in 5 minutes," his assistant reminded him. Christian nodded without looking. When she left, he opened the drawer beside him. Inside was a single strand of copper hair he had picked up from the subway floor the night before. He did not know why he had kept it, maybe because it felt more real than anything else in his life. That night, Ella wandered near the river, where the bridges arched like silver ribs over the water. She had nowhere to go. The shelter was full, the library closed. The cold crawled into her bones. She sat on the steps of a closed cafe, pressing the velvet box against her chest. "Do you ever feel like the world forgot you?" she whispered to the darkness. A man passing by glanced at her, hesitated, then dropped a dollar bill into her lap before walking away. She looked down at it, smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you." Somewhere above the skyline, Christian scrolled through security footage from the station. He should have been reviewing investment reports, but instead he was searching for her face. He paused when he found her sitting on the bench, cutting her hair, handing it away. Something inside him twisted. He picked up the phone. "Find me the girl from last night, the one from the subway station, whatever it takes." Hours later, as dawn approached again, Christian stood by his office window, unable to shake the feeling that something in his life had changed forever. Down below, the city began to stir, unaware that one man had just made a promise to himself, a promise to find the woman who had given up her beauty for a stranger's truth. And somewhere in the same city, a girl with short hair and a velvet box walked toward another uncertain morning, not knowing that her story had just begun. 2 days passed. The air turned colder, sharper, the kind that made every breath sting just a little. The city moved as if nothing had changed, but for Ella, every corner of it felt heavier. She had spent 2 nights sleeping under the bridge near the river. The sound of water was her lullaby, and the cardboard under her back was her only comfort. That morning, she stood in front of a small coffee stand, staring at the steam rising from the cups inside. The smell of roasted beans made her dizzy. She reached into her coat pocket, searching for a few coins, but there was nothing left. Just the velvet box. Just the memory of what she had lost. A soft voice broke through the cold. "Excuse me, miss. I am sorry to ask, but could you spare $10? I lost my wallet, and I need to get home." She turned. A man stood before her, his clothes wrinkled, his hair slightly messy, and his eyes tired. He looked like any other stranger in trouble. But there was something familiar about the way he spoke, the way his voice trembled, not from fear, but from humility. $10. That was all he asked for. The same amount she once had and gave away for someone else's sake. Ella froze. She could lie and say she had nothing, and it would not be far from the truth. But she looked at him again and saw the same loneliness she carried every day. Without a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the small paper envelope the man from the bridge had dropped before. Inside were 2 $5 bills, the last of what she had. She hesitated only for a moment. "Here," she said softly. "Take it, get home safe." The man blinked, clearly surprised. "You are serious? You do not even know me." "I do not need to," she answered. "Sometimes we help people because we remember what it feels like to need help." He stared at her, as if trying to understand the reason behind her words. "I will pay you back," he said. "I promise." She smiled faintly. "Just promise to use it for something good." He nodded slowly, took the money, and left. The crowd swallowed him in seconds. Ella stayed there for a while, watching the people rush past, her fingers still cold from the exchange. That same afternoon, Christian sat in the back seat of his car, watching traffic crawl along Fifth Avenue. He was not the man who had asked for money that morning, but the one who had sent an assistant to test kindness in a city that had forgotten the word. The report came through on his phone. "Target located. She gave away her last $10. He closed his eyes. She had done it again. Gave when she had nothing. His driver spoke quietly. Sir, do you want to continue the search? Christian opened his eyes and looked out the window at the busy street. Yes, he said, but this time I will go myself. As the car turned down the narrow road toward the lower east side, the sky began to darken with early snow. Somewhere near the bus stop, he saw her. Short hair, thin coat, holding a paper cup of water instead of coffee. She was feeding crumbs to a stray dog that wagged its tail beside her. He stepped out of the car without a word. For a few moments, he simply watched her. The world around them blurred, the honking cars, the neon lights, the cold wind, all of it faded into silence. She had no idea the man she had just given her last $10 to was the same man who had once stood in front of her, rich beyond imagination, yet poorer in spirit than she would ever be. If you were in her place, would you have done the same? Would you have given your last $10 to a stranger? The wind howled that evening, rattling old street signs and tugging at every piece of loose paper that dared to stay on the ground. The first snow of the season began to fall, light at first, then thicker, turning the city's gray into white. Ella tightened her thin coat around her, her hands tucked under her arms for warmth. Her stomach growled again, but she ignored it. She had done a good thing today. Somehow, that felt like enough. She walked toward the small community kitchen near the church. The line outside was longer than usual. She took her place quietly, keeping her eyes low. The volunteers moved fast inside, handing out steaming bowls of soup and pieces of bread. When her turn came, she whispered a thank you, took her tray, and found an empty seat in the corner. For a few minutes, all she did was eat. It was not much, but the warmth filled her chest, softening the ache that had been living there for too long. She was about to finish when a murmur rippled through the room. People were whispering, pointing toward the door. A man in a dark wool coat stepped inside. He looked completely out of place. His posture, his shoes, the way he scanned the room, it was not how people moved in shelters. Yet his eyes were gentle, curious, almost searching. He carried a tray himself and joined the line like everyone else. Ella lowered her head, not wanting to draw attention. But somehow, the man noticed her. He smiled slightly, the kind of smile that could melt through frost. Then he walked over and sat across from her. Cold night, he said softly. She nodded without meeting his eyes. It usually is. He studied her for a moment. You were at the subway station 2 nights ago, right? Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. She looked up sharply. How do you know that? Because I was there, he answered. You gave up something you loved to help someone else. She frowned. Are you following me? He raised his hand slightly. Not in a bad way. I needed to see you again. There was something in his tone, earnest, quiet, almost ashamed. You are that man? She asked. The one who asked for $10? He nodded slowly. Yes, my name is Christian. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The room felt smaller suddenly. You do not look like someone who lost his wallet. He smiled faintly. That is because I did not. I wanted to know if kindness still existed in this city. You proved that it does. She leaned back, confused. You tested me? I tested the world, he said gently. But you were the answer I did not expect. For a long time, neither spoke. The hum of conversation filled the air again, but it felt distant. Finally, she said quietly, You could have just asked. Quote, I know, he whispered, and I am sorry, but I want to make it right. Let me buy you dinner, real dinner. No tricks, no tests. Ella laughed softly, a tired sound. People like me do not eat where people like you go. Then we will eat where you want, he said. She shook her head. I do not want pity. It is not pity, Christian said, his eyes steady on hers. It is gratitude. She looked at him for a long time, then at the bowl of soup that was now cold. Fine, she said finally, but only if we eat outside. The city lights are free. Christian smiled, truly smiled this time. Deal. And so, under falling snow and the glow of streetlights, they shared their first meal together, 2 strangers, connected by a simple act of kindness that neither fully understood yet. But sometimes, the smallest gesture is enough to change the entire course of a life. Snow still drifted through the night as they left the soup kitchen. The streets were nearly empty, the lamps glowing gold through the white haze. Christian held 2 paper cups of hot tea while Ella walked beside him, her steps cautious but light. She had no idea that the man next to her could buy the entire block they were walking through. To her, he was just another soul trying to stay warm. They stopped under a small awning, the kind that barely shielded them from the snow. Christian handed her the cup. "Here, it is not much, but it helps." Quote. She accepted it, both hands wrapped around it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It is the first warm thing I have held all day." For a while they just stood there, watching the snow fall. It covered everything equally: rich cars, broken benches, shining sidewalks, and forgotten alleys. There was something fair about it, something Ella liked. Christian broke the silence first. "Can I ask you something? Why did you sell your hair for that ring?" She looked at him, a little surprised. "You saw that?" "I did," he admitted. "I was there." Her shoulders stiffened. "Then you know why." "The ring was not mine, but I could not stand seeing something so beautiful lost in dirt. It felt wrong." He smiled slightly. "Most people would have kept it." "I am not most people," she said simply. "And besides, what good would it do? Beauty means nothing when it comes from a lie." Quote. Her words hit him harder than she could have known. Christian lowered his eyes, remembering the empty sparkle of the gala lights, the fake smiles, the woman who had promised him forever but cared only for the ring itself. "I guess I needed to hear that," he said softly. Ella tilted her head. "What about you? Why were you at the soup kitchen?" "You do not look like someone who needs help." He laughed under his breath. "Maybe I needed a different kind of help." "Lonely?" she guessed. He nodded. "Something like that." They started walking again, side by side through the quiet streets. The city felt smaller around them, almost gentle. For a moment, Christian forgot who he was supposed to be: the investor, the CEO, the man everyone wanted something from. Around Ella, he was just a person. They reached the park by the river. The benches were dusted with snow, the water below glinting under the streetlights. Christian took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders without saying a word. She tried to give it back, but he stopped her with a look. "Please," he said, "it is just a coat." "You will freeze," she protested. "I will manage," he said. "You already gave enough." She stared at him for a long time, then sighed and kept it on. "You are strange, you know that?" "I have been told," he said with a small smile. For the first time in a long while, Ella laughed, a real laugh, the kind that chased away the cold. Christian found himself laughing too, though he did not know why. Maybe because, in that moment, everything felt simple. The snow fell harder, muffling the world around them. Ella looked at him, her eyes soft. "You really do not have to help me." "Maybe I need to," he replied. "Maybe helping you is the first honest thing I have done in years." She blinked, uncertain how to answer. Something about his words felt heavier than the snow itself. In the silence that followed, their breaths mingled in the cold air, and for the first time, Christian realized that kindness did not flow one way. It was not about who gave or who received, it was about two people finding warmth in the same storm. The next morning arrived quietly, the snow from the night before still blanketing the city in white silence. Ella woke up in a small corner of the park, wrapped in Christian's coat. It still held his scent, something faintly warm and unfamiliar, like cedar and rain. For the first time in weeks, she had slept deeply. She sat up, folded the coat carefully, and placed it on her lap. He had told her to keep it, but she could not. It did not belong to her. Nothing about him did. Across town, Christian walked into the towering glass lobby of Miller Enterprises. The guards greeted him with practiced smiles, and his assistant hurried over with a tablet full of meetings. His mind, however, was elsewhere. Every reflection in the marble floor reminded him of Ella's eyes. The way she had said beauty meant nothing when it came from a lie. He looked around at the polished luxury that surrounded him, the empire built from his family's name, and for the first time, it all felt like a costume. His assistant spoke again. "Sir, the press is already in the conference room. Today's announcement will stream live." He nodded, his jaw tightening. The press conference had been planned for weeks. He was supposed to announce a merger worth billions, alongside his fiancée, Victoria Lane. But he had not seen Victoria since the night she accused Ella of theft. As the cameras flashed, Christian stepped to the microphone. His assistant whispered, "Sir, Miss Lane is on her way." Christian took a deep breath and said into the mic, "Actually, this announcement will not go as planned." The room quieted instantly. Dozens of journalists stared at him. The air felt charged, electric. "Before we talk about business," he continued, "I need to talk about truth." The doors burst open. Victoria walked in, perfect as always, a diamond necklace glinting at her throat. She smiled tightly. "Christian, what are you doing?" "I am doing what I should have done a long time ago," he said, ending lies. A murmur spread through the room. Victoria's face froze. "Excuse me?" He looked straight at her. "The ring you lost, the one you said was stolen, was never stolen. It was returned by someone with more honesty in her heart than either of us ever had." Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed like lightning. Victoria's expression hardened. "You cannot be serious. Are you really humiliating me in front of the press over some homeless girl?" Christian's voice was calm but steady. "She is not just some girl. She is the only person who showed me what real worth looks like." Quote, for the first time, the journalist saw something human in his face. No arrogance, no corporate mask, just truth. He left the podium, ignoring the shouts and the cameras, and walked straight out of the building. That afternoon, Ella sat on the same park bench, staring at the river. The sky was pale, the air sharp. She held the coat close to her chest. A familiar voice spoke behind her. "You forgot something." She turned. Christian stood there, not in his dark coat from before, but in a tailored suit. For a moment, she did not recognize him. "Christian?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "The real one." Her eyes widened as the realization sank in. "You are him, the man from the papers, the millionaire." He nodded. "I was afraid to tell you. I wanted you to see me without all of this," he said, gesturing to the world that seemed to follow him everywhere. She stepped back, her voice trembling. "You lied to me." Quote, "Yes," he admitted, "and I am sorry, but every lie I told led me to something real. You." Tears stung her eyes, but she shook her head. "I do not belong in your world." "Then let me build one where we both do," he said softly. She stared at him, speechless. The wind lifted her short hair as if to remind her of what she had already sacrificed for honesty. "Tell me," she said quietly, "why should I trust you now?" He looked at her without flinching. "Because you are the only person who ever made me want to deserve trust. Would you forgive him? Or would you walk away, knowing the truth came too late?" The wind tore through the park like a restless ghost, lifting the snow from the ground and tossing it into the air. Ella stood frozen, staring at Christian. His confession hung between them, heavier than the cold. The city noise faded into the background. All she could hear was the thudding of her own heartbeat. "You had every chance to tell me," she whispered. "You could have been honest from the start." "I know," he said quietly, "but I was afraid. I thought, if you knew who I really was, you would never look at me the same way again." She laughed bitterly. "You were right about that." Christian stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air. "Please, Ella, listen to me. I never meant to deceive you. I just wanted to understand what it felt like to be seen for who I am, not for what I own." Quote, she shook her head. "Do you even realize how cruel that sounds? You chose to play pretend while I had nothing to pretend about. You got to go home to your mansion. I had to go back to the street." Her voice cracked, but she refused to cry. Christian looked down, ashamed. "You are right. I cannot change what I did, but I can change what happens next." "You cannot fix everything with money," she said, her eyes flashing. He met her gaze. "Maybe not, but I can start with honesty." Quote. He reached into his pocket and took out the velvet box. Inside, the engagement ring sparkled faintly in the pale light. "This belongs to you now," he said. Ella stared at it, disbelief flooding her face. "Do not do that. That ring means nothing to me." "It means something to me," he said. "It means forgiveness." She pushed the box back into his hand. "You cannot buy that." Christian's voice softened. "Then tell me how to earn it." She looked at him for a long time before answering. "Stop trying to save me. I do not need saving." He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a familiar voice cut through the wind. "Well, this is touching," said Victoria, stepping out from behind a tree, her heels clicking on the icy path. She was dressed in white, her fur coat gleaming against the snow. "So this is the charity case that replaced me." Ella tensed. Christian's jaw tightened. "Victoria, go home." "I think not," she said, smiling coldly. "You humiliated me in front of the entire country. Did you really think I would let that go?" Christian's expression darkened. "What do you want?" She crossed her arms. "I want everyone to see the truth. You think this girl is so pure? Ask her how she bought that ring back for you. She sold her hair for it. desperate, pathetic, and probably lying. That is enough, Christian said firmly. Victoria smirked. Go ahead, defend her. It will not change what people think. They will see her as what she is, a street girl who thought she could climb her way into your world. Ella's face turned pale. The words cut deeper than the cold ever could. You do not know me, she said quietly. Oh, I know your kind, Victoria sneered. Christian stepped between them. Victoria, leave now. You have done enough damage. Victoria looked him over, her lips curling into a cruel smile. You will regret this, both of you. Then she turned and walked away, her laughter echoing down the empty path. When she was gone, Ella looked at Christian, her voice trembling. You see? This is what your world does to people like me. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Ella, please. She shook her head, tears finally breaking free. No, you wanted to understand what kindness feels like. Well, now you know what betrayal feels like too. Agree. She turned and walked away through the snow, the hem of his coat trailing behind her, leaving him standing alone under the gray sky. And for the first time in years, Christian Miller, the man who had everything, realized that he might have just lost the only thing that truly mattered. The storm hit that night. Rain swept through the city, blurring lights into streaks of gold and gray. Christian drove with one hand tight on the steering wheel, the other gripping the ring box like a lifeline. He had spent hours searching parks, shelters, every corner where she might have gone. Each empty bench felt like another silent punishment. He had money, power, and a name that opened every door, but none of it could lead him back to Ella. By midnight, he stopped near the bridge where they had first spoken, the same bridge where she had once slept under the cold iron beams. He stepped out into the rain, calling her name. His voice echoed against the river. Nothing. A soaked newspaper clung to his shoe. He bent down to pick it up, ready to throw it away, then froze. There she was, a small photo on the community page. Local volunteer starts project to help homeless women regain confidence through free haircuts. Beneath it, Ella Grace, founder of Second Chance Cuts. He stared at the page, water dripping from his hair. You did it, he whispered. He drove across the city until he reached a narrow street where an old building glowed faintly through the rain. A hand-painted sign above the door read Second Chance Cuts. Inside, the lights were still on. He pushed open the door and stepped into the small, warm room. The air smelled of soap and coffee. Mirrors lined the walls, some cracked, some new. A few women sat in old salon chairs, their faces glowing with timid smiles, as Ella worked with careful hands, trimming, washing, listening. She turned when she heard the door creak. Her face went pale. Christian? He stood there, drenched from head to toe. You built this, he said softly. You made something beautiful. She set down the scissors, her voice trembling. Why are you here? To tell you that I was wrong, he said, and to prove that I can do something right. He walked to the counter and placed an envelope there. It was thick, sealed, and marked with his company's emblem. It is not money for you, he said before she could refuse. It is funding for this place for the women who come here. No conditions, no contracts, just support. Ella hesitated. You do not owe me anything. He smiled faintly. I owe you everything. You reminded me who I wanted to be. The women in the salon watched quietly as Ella approached him. You do not have to do this, she whispered. I do, he said, because I was the one who made you doubt your kindness. I will not let the world take that from you again. Her eyes softened, the anger slowly melting away. Why now, Christian? Why come back? He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Because I realized something when you walked away. I went undercover to find truth, but all I found was emptiness. The only real thing I found was you. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. You are still dramatic, she said. He laughed quietly. Maybe. But I mean every word. Come, Seg. He opened the velvet box again. The same ring gleamed inside, the diamond catching the soft light of the salon. I do not expect you to say yes now, he said. But this time, it is not a test. It is a promise, to stand beside you, not above you. Ella stared at the ring, then at the man holding it. The rain tapped against the windows like a heartbeat. She reached out slowly, closed the box, and whispered, Keep it. If you truly mean what you say, help me grow this place instead. Grald. He nodded, slipping the box into his pocket. Then that is exactly what I will do. And for the first time, they both smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because redemption had finally found its way back to them, one drop of rain at a time. A year passed. The seasons changed, the river thawed, and the city began to bloom again. On the same street where rain once washed away tears, a new sign now shimmered proudly in the morning light. Second Chance Cuts, a foundation by Christian Miller and Ella Grace. Inside, the once tiny salon had grown into a community center. The mirrors were replaced, the walls painted in soft cream and gold. There were laughter and stories in every corner. Women who had once walked in trembling now stood tall, cutting hair for others, rebuilding their lives one strand at a time. Ella stood by the window, her hair short but glowing, trimmed neatly above her shoulders. It had grown just enough to move when she turned her head. She was different now, stronger, calmer, but still carrying the same quiet grace that first caught Christian's heart. Christian entered the room, holding 2 cups of coffee. He wore no suit today, only a sweater and rolled sleeves. He looked around at the bustle inside, his expression soft with pride. "You did this?" he said, handing her the cup. She smiled. "We did this." He laughed lightly. "You know, the board thought I was crazy when I told them I wanted to invest in a hair salon. They were right," she said, teasing him. "But sometimes being crazy is the only way to be kind." He nodded slowly. "I have learned that from you." They walked through the rows of chairs, greeting the women, checking supplies. Every face they saw reminded them why they were there. This was not about guilt anymore. It was about purpose. Near the door stood a young girl, no more than 16, nervously holding a bundle of her long black hair. Ella approached her gently. "Are you sure you want to do this?" The girl nodded. "It is for my mom. She has cancer." Ella smiled warmly. "That is a beautiful reason." She led her to a chair, combing the hair carefully before cutting it with a single clean motion. The strands fell like dark silk to the floor. "You know," Ella said softly, "I once sold my hair too. I thought I was losing everything, but it turned out I was gaining something better." The girl looked at her through the mirror. "What did you gain?" "Hope," Ella answered. Across the room, Christian watched the moment quietly. He remembered that first night under the streetlight, the sound of scissors, the trembling courage in her eyes. The same act of sacrifice that had once broken his heart was now the heartbeat of an entire movement. When the girl left with a grateful smile, Ella turned toward him. "Sometimes I think it was all meant to happen," she said. "The ring, the lies, the storm, everything led here." Christian stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Maybe destiny is just kindness in disguise." She laughed softly. "You still talk like a man who writes speeches." He smiled. "Then let me finish one." Quote. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box, the same one that had traveled through every chapter of their story. The diamond still shone, but this time it did not symbolize wealth or power. It symbolized choice. He opened it slowly and said, "Ella Grace, I do not want to test love anymore. I want to live it. Will you marry me not as a millionaire, not as a savior, but as a man who finally understands what love really costs?" The room fell silent. The women paused. The sound of the city faded beyond the glass. Ella stared at him, tears bright in her eyes. Then she smiled a soft, radiant smile that felt like sunlight breaking through winter. "Yes," she whispered. "But only if you promise one thing." "Anything," he said. "Never forget how this all started with $10 and a little bit of faith." Christian laughed, slipping the ring on her finger. "I promise." "Yeah." Outside, the wind carried the laughter of the crowd as snowflakes began to fall again, tiny reminders that every act of kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way home. And now, it was her turn to give back. "So tell me, if kindness came back to you when you least expected it, would you recognize it? Or would you let it pass by, unaware that it was love, finally returning the favor?"